This is Fantasy Football Picks and Bets presented by Prize Picks. Use code MMN when you deposit at prizepicks.com to get a match deposit of up to $100. Meaning, if you deposit $100, you will have $200 to play with on prizepicks.com. Check out the fantasy props, the overs and the unders coming up. Momentarily, Pete Overzet is going to have the DraftKings first look and research for you for the week to get started, to get your plans on the go, to go win some of that money. Plus, I do want to let you know that if you go to runthesims.com/Mayo, you'll get a discount on the DFS Optimizer, the single game showdown simulator, and you can run everything, including your own custom projections, up to 10,000 times to see the distribution of floor and ceiling and where those medium projections are going to be. I highly recommend it. runthesims.com/Mayo. Enough of me. Let's get to Pete.
All right, guys, after an absolutely brutal week 9, I have never been so excited to look forward to the next week's slate. I'm Peter Overzet here on the Mayo Media Network. And as always, we are going to do a first look on the salaries. This will be for the Week 10 DFS slate on DraftKings. A few things to note here. Not a bad bye week. We have the Bears on bye, the Giants on bye, the Bengals, and the Texans. So outside of the Bengals, I don't know if I'm really going to miss too many of these teams. I mean, Daniel Jones threw for 110 yards. The Bears have been a disaster. The Texans have been a disaster. So all things considered, not too bad on the buy front. That said, we are losing a few of our premium teams to the primetime games. We don't have Baltimore. They play on Thursday night. We don't have Kansas City, although maybe that's a good thing based on how they're playing. They play the Raiders on Sunday night. And then we don't have the Rams and 49ers. Both of them pretty nice DFS teams for us this year. They go on Monday night. So we are losing a little bit of firepower there. We do have what I think is going to be a better slate of games as far as an over-under. You know, I'm seeing Dallas, Atlanta right now at a 53 over-under. I'm seeing Tampa Bay and Washington at a 51.5, and the Chargers in Minnesota at 51.5, and a couple other teams up here close to a 50-point over-under. So hopefully we get more points than we did in week 9, which was one of the lowest scoring slates of the year. I think the winning Millie Maker lineup only had 205 points in it. I feel like we've seen weeks where the cash game lineups had more than 205 points. So hopefully an aberration. Hopefully we can get these points flowing. And I am here to give you my first thoughts, first opinions as I look at these salaries. So like I said, with the quarterbacks up there on the top end, no Mahomes, no Lamar, no Stafford, none of that. Kyler will be an interesting one. He, of course, missed this past week. Colt McCoy filled in for him. You know, Kyler hasn't been really paying off that top end price tag since the beginning of the season. So that's going to be a tough pill to swallow if he is back. And Josh Allen as well. You know, that offense feels a little broken right now. You know, he still has a high floor just because he's rushing a decent amount, but he only had 12.5 points against the Jags there. So pretty rough outing for Josh Allen. So at the top end already, you can certainly poke holes in a lot of these guys. Brady, I think, is going to be very popular in this spot at 7,600. Herbert here at home versus the Vikings, I think also should be very popular. He looks like a great play. So I do wonder if it's one of these weeks where people have said, hey, I've had enough of Kyler. I've had enough of Josh Allen. I'm going to go down to Tom Brady and Justin Herbert here in the mid 7s. We also have a bit of injury news. We have Russell Wilson, who's been activated to return. It sounds like he will play against the Packers on Sunday. I'm, of course, recording this Monday afternoon, so we'll need to stay tuned. Lots of updates, lots of things that can change the outlook. But as of now, Russell Wilson has been designated to return, and at 6,700 here against Green Bay, I imagine we'll see that total come up, and that will probably be a pretty nice game to target here for fantasy purposes. I still really like Jalen Hurts. his price just seems kind of, locked in cement in this 6.5 to 7K range. He had not as many points as you'd like to see against the Chargers, but he did have his, obligatory 62 yards rushing, and he just has that, floor ceiling combo that we really like in DFS. So I'll keep buying the dip there if people are getting afraid of him. And, Denver has found themselves in lots of shootouts too. So I could see that game being fairly interesting from a DFS perspective. I'm not going to lie. I was trying to look for some cheap quarterbacks this week, and it's not looking as good as last week. We had Jordan Love. We had Jacoby Brissett pop up at the last minute. We had Tyrod Taylor. This week, it's looking a little tighter down there. I will say Baker Mayfield looked much, much better in his debut sans Odell Beckham, but now he's in a really tough spot on the road here against New England. And we saw what New England just did to Sam Darnold. So that doesn't look great. We're going to have to monitor the injury with Trevor Lawrence. He popped up on the injury report with an ankle. Coach Urban Meyer saying he does expect him to play, but not going to be too exciting as a start there. We also will have to see what Sean Payton does here with the Trevor Siemian and Taysom Hill battle. My instinct is Siemian played just good enough to remain the starting quarterback. If for some reason Taysom Hill were to be named the starter at 5,200, he would become kind of our premier cheap quarterback play this week. I expect Aaron Rodgers to be back unless he finds a way to do something dumb and not play, which he's now ventured into that territory where we can't be sure of anything that Aaron Rodgers is going to say or do. But yeah, it's looking pretty bleak down here. We'll have to see what's going to go on with the New York Jets situation. And yeah, not a lot down here. I mean, they're just begging you to play Sam Darnold at 5,200. I know everyone's ready to dance on his grave, as far as DFS goes, but Arizona, if they get Kyler back and that game plays a little fast, I don't mind maybe some garbage time Sam Darnold there. We'll see. But quarterback looking pretty thin. I mean, just jumping out to me, it's like Brady, Herbert, Jalen Hurts. I mean, those are the guys that look pretty decent to me. Oh, and then Russell Wilson as well. So I could see ownership really condensing around 3 or 4 of those guys. Now, on the flip side, I was looking at running backs for this week, and running back looks loaded. Not only do we have Christian McCaffrey back, you have to assume his role expands after he was a little limited last week. He had 14 carries, 4 receptions, which is still a great workload. But we know he can be up in this 20 attempt, 7 to 8 reception territory. And I would imagine now that he has a week back getting acclimated, I think he will be a great play at 8,400. Alvin Kamara, there's been lots of concerns. Will Mark Ingram eat into his workload? Will Taysom Hill at the goal line? He still gave us the line that you kind of hope for. He had 13 rushing attempts. He got the rushing TD in the goal line work. He had 7 targets in the passing game. So, I think we always want more volume from our guys, but that workload is pretty deserving of that price tag up there. We are seeing Jonathan Taylor now get really priced up. He, of course, has the monster game on Thursday Night Football last week. He's starting to get into this territory where you really have to make a decision. Is this for real? Is this sustainable? Or are there certain game scripts and stuff that make him more fragile, kind of similar to what we see like with Nick Chubb? No one questions the running talent at all, but there are game scenarios and coaching play calling decisions that sometimes can make these guys not as good of plays as their price tag would indicate. So right now I'm kind of leaning toward a Jay Taylor fade, but that feels pretty risky, especially at home against Jacksonville. Although who knows? Jacksonville just played the Bills really tough. Dalvin Cook had a great game in a tough spot on the road against Baltimore. He's going to project well here. We're going to see Najee Harris play tonight, but he's getting just an absolute robust bell cow workload. 23 carries, 24 carries, 26 carries these past 3 games. And then, of course, playing tonight. Nick Chubb set the world on fire in week 9. He's here at 7,400. Guessing he's going to be fairly popular. I don't think the New England defense is scaring anyone off of Nick Chubb. So as you can see here, I mean, this top end is just absolutely loaded. This past week, we were kind of deciding, no one wanted to play McCaffrey. Everyone kind of shrugged at Kamara and Dalvin Cook's matchups, it was not good. I mean, it became Zeke and Eckler were chalk. Those were kind of the two best options, and even they weren't separating from a projection standpoint. Whereas I think this week is going to be very fun for tournaments as far as running backs, just because there's so many viable ways to go at the top end. And I didn't even mention Zeke and Aaron Jones yet. So Aaron Jones getting Rodgers back, I think will be a much better play. We also get DeAndre Swift back on this slate. He looks really good and always projects well. Cordell Patterson, every single week, this dude finds a way to do it. He didn't do it through the rushing game, but in the receiving game, 6 for 126. So I never play Cordell Patterson, and every week I'm like, why am I not playing this dude? He's a playmaker. James Conner. In the old days, DraftKings probably would have him priced at like 5,400 and he would have been 80% chalk, but they did a good job pricing him up. It does sound like Chase Edmonds is going to miss at least this week. If that's the case, I think James Conner is still underpriced by probably $1,000. And even that might be conservative. I mean, he was getting true bell cow usage. We know that this offense can produce a ton of fantasy points for running backs. So to see him get 21 attempts, 5 targets, I mean, that should put him, up in the range with Dalvin Cook and Eckler. That's the kind of workload that he is earning right now. I do think there's a small bit of risk that he received all the workload because he was the only one to practice all week. Whereas with a week of practice, Benjamin did come in. He got some carries. He also was a little involved in the passing game, running some routes. So I could see it being more of like a 70-30 split than like a 90-10. But even at a 70-30 split, this price tag looks pretty appetizing to me at home against Carolina. So I have a feeling James Conner is going to be fairly popular this week, and rightfully so. I will say Michael Carter stood out to me as appearing way too cheap here at 5,600. His role has really grown since the bye. And what we love about him are these targets. I think this game against Indy was just kind of a little funky here. And as you can see from his previous target totals coming out of the bye, 9 and 14, I'm going to chalk up the 2 last week as a bit more of an aberration. So I'm happy to buy the dip on Michael Carter. I think Antonio Gibson is really interesting at 5,500. I know that the Bucs defense has been stout, and I know that he was dealing with a shin injury, but you got to assume with the bye week, if he was able to heal and rest that a bit, I mean, Antonio Gibson, we were playing him up at 6,800 earlier this season. So you're now getting a pretty good discount on him. That jumps out to me. I don't know if I can do Zach Moss again, man. I feel I do Zach Moss every week. I talk myself into it, and he burns me. I have a feeling he's going to project decently here if he's healthy. He did have the head injury and he had to exit that game. Not a lot down here jumping out to me in this cheap range as of right now. So we're gonna have to wait and see if anything shakes out. One guy I would mention is Ramondre Stevenson. Both him and Damian Harris exited the game due to head injuries, but Ramondre was running really well. He looked really good, 10 attempts for 62 yards. He's one of those guys where we don't really know what to make of the situation just because he's been a healthy scratch, in week 7, in weeks 2 and 3 and 4. So it's like, what's going on with this guy? But whenever he is on the field, as we saw in preseason and as we're seeing in this stretch of games here, he plays really well. I think he's a talented running back. So if for some reason he was in and Damian Harris was out, I mean, he would be an absolute smash at 4,500. So we'll have to keep tabs on that. Let's head over to wide receiver, which kind of opposite of running back doesn't feel as strong to me this week. I do assume Devontae Adams, who is the same price as Tyreek Hill was last week, getting Aaron Rodgers back, he is going to be very popular. I think people are going to want to play Devontae Adams in this spot, and I do not blame them at home with Rodgers against the Seahawks in a potential shootout. A lot of these other guys, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, they are priced pretty expensive, so you're going to have to pay up to get those guys, but definitely alpha studs that are worth it. We see Stephon Diggs's price slowly coming down. We are a long way from last year when he was getting those massive target share games. Obviously, this offensive struggling, but not the worst spot here against the Jets. We saw Michael Pittman had a good game against them last week. So I don't know. I'll be curious to see where the kind of field sentiment is on him by Sunday when we roll around to game time. CD Lamb's price tag holding strong up here. I think he was at 7,200 last week. Keenan Allen now back to kind of being the alpha one in LA, despite that little blip from Mike Williams at the beginning of the year. He had 13 targets yesterday, so he's going to project well even at 7,000. I mentioned I like these Bucks guys. You know, we still don't have Antonio Brown, so Godwin and Evans I think look like nice plays. And these Seahawks guys with Russell Wilson coming back. I mean, Metcalf at 6,800. I mean, we've basically, for the most part of the season, have seen Metcalf priced up here more around the AJ Brown and Justin Jefferson. And I think this pricing discrepancy is coming because the algorithm didn't know Russell Wilson was going to be returning. And so I think Metcalf otherwise would be at least up here in the 72 to 7,300 range. I'm guessing Metcalf is one of the more popular wide receivers on the slate at 6,800. Down here, we have a lot of familiar faces. Michael Pittman's price is going up. DJ Moore's is going down. We, of course, have Devonta Smith coming off a good game. His price ticks up a bit. These Broncos wide receivers continue to kind of hover in these mid fives. Sutton's really taken a hit now that Judy's come back. So I do prefer Judy here to Sutton at 5,300. He had 8 targets last week, and Sutton kind of getting squeezed because Tim Patrick is playing well too. So he only had 2 targets there in that game against the Cowboys. He did have that 2-point conversion, but just not getting the workload that we were seeing earlier. It is tough to find cheap wide receivers this early in the week. I mean, I was trying, guys. I'm telling you, I was trying. Jacoby Myers, I think at 4,800 here is somewhat interesting at home against Cleveland. He only had the 1 reception, but again, when you kind of look at his workload previous to this game, you know, his targets have been much better. So I think this was a little blip on the radar as far as it just being a super gross game on both sides of the ball. Mac Jones didn't play that well. So Jacoby Myers at 4,800 looks good to me. Elijah Moore, if you buy that breakout, you know, he had those 2 TDs, 8 targets. He's really kind of performed a lot better since the bye, you know, 6 targets, 8 targets. So I could see him being fairly popular at 4,700. Man, I don't know how many times Rondell Moore can burn us. You know, he did have the 5 targets, but with Chase Edmonds out, you wonder if they try to scheme him more, give him more of that kind of pass catching work that they were giving Chase Edmonds. We still don't know what the situation is going to be with AJ Green and DeAndre Hopkins. So still leaving a candle on for Rondell Moore. And, you know, I can keep scrolling down here. It's a little tough. If Michael Gallup were somehow to be activated, there was rumors he might be activated before week 9. That didn't happen. If Michael Gallup's activated at 4,000, I mean, he is going to be an absolute smash and a very popular play. Down here, though, it's gross. You know, I'm scrolling through these names. I guess somebody like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, if Rodgers is back, could be interesting. I'm not going to chase the 2 touchdown game from Malik Turner. That was an aberration. I feel pretty strongly about that. Yeah, so we're going to have to sit tight, wait and see if there's anything down here that pops, because right now I'm not seeing much wide receiver value. Over at tight end, we don't have Waller, we don't have Kelsey, we don't have Kittle, we don't have Mark Andrews. So this is a pretty thinned out tight end slate. You know, Kyle Pitts has been fine. We've seen him flash kind of his ceiling, but this offense is just kind of struggling from a pass perspective now, and defenses are really honing in on Kyle Pitts. But he always has the upside to break the slate. We do get TJ Hawkinson back on the main slate. You know, he's coming off of some massive target games, 11, 9, 11. So anytime you're averaging over 10 targets a game, you're going to be very much in play. Dalton Schultz, I'm kind of shocked that he's priced above Dallas Goedert. I felt like last week it kind of flew under the radar a little bit that Blake Jarwin was out. And Schultz is just going to project very well now that Jarwin is out of the picture. The problem is the Cowboys offense just imploded last week, and so he didn't get there. But I still feel pretty confident that Schultz is going to be a good play. Even in that game, he had those 5 targets and will have a really nice red zone role as well. Noah Fant, I would assume, would be returning from COVID. This is going to be a nice matchup at home against Philadelphia. He looks mispriced to me at 4,300. We've seen him throughout the season priced up here closer to Goddard, around 4,800. So 4,300 I'm going to guess he's going to project pretty well and be fairly popular down there. Not seeing a lot in cheap tight ends, similar to last week having a lot of good cheap quarterbacks. We had lots of good cheap tight ends. We had, Akui Bunam. We had Conklin. We had Jared Cook. All of these guys who have gotten slightly priced up. I guess Jared Cook is the same price as he was last week, but now we see the Chargers are running basically a three-way committee at tight end, which muddies the situation for him. But the point I was trying to make is I'm not seeing a lot of obvious value at tight end right now. Maybe something like a Gerald Everett with Russell Wilson coming back. Maybe that could be interesting at 2,600. But yeah, we're going to have to wait and see on that. Otherwise, Noah Fant is really standing out to me, otherwise paying up for one of these top tier options. And as always, I try to take a quick glance at the defenses, see if I have it deep within me to come up with some defensive take here on a Monday afternoon. Buffalo at home, or the Jets at home versus Buffalo. I mean, with as poorly as the Bills have been playing, I really think the Jets will be in the conversation at the stone minimum. Not seeing a lot else here in this low range. Titans at home, 2,600 versus Simeon or Taysom Hill. That will be in play. The Browns versus Mac Jones will be in play. I could see the Chargers at home versus Kirk Cousins in play. The Cowboys at home versus Matt Ryan. So some better options here in the mid tier. And then up on the high end, yeah, Steelers looking very nice there at home versus Detroit. Bills versus whoever the Jets trot out at QB, and the Cardinals at home versus Sam Darnold, who just appears broken right now. That looks pretty good to me as well. So that is your first look. That is your primer. As I always mention, a lot will change between now and Sunday, but wanted to get you guys started on the right track. If you guys want to, take your DFS to the next level, whether that's with Showdown or main slates, I highly recommend checking out Run the Sims. They run 10,000 simulations for every slate, and it is a great way to compare what the math is saying is correct for these plays relative to ownership percentages. And you can really figure out quickly what are the best leverage plays. We often see guys like Cordell Patterson continues to pop in the Run the Sims relative to how much he's being owned. So it's a really good tool for both hand builders and the optimizer bros out there to use those tools to make better lineups. You can use promo code Pete over there, get 10% off. It also gets you access to a private Run the Sims channel in my Discord, the Deposit Kingdom Discord. So feel free to hit me up on Twitter or hop in the Deposit Kingdom Discord, and I would be happy to tell you more about that and all the good stuff we got going on over at Run the Sims. I appreciate you guys watching this video. Make sure you subscribe, like the channel. We'll be back later in the week with more bets, more DFS content, because that's what Pat Mayo does around here on the now I can't talk. The Mayo Media Network. So I am Peter Overzet. I will see you guys next week for the Week 11 preview.